Hello and welcome to Methodologies and Frameworks episode 2 as part of our Red Teaming Fundamentals mini-series. And in this video, we'll be building upon the previous, where we discussed the theoretical roots of red teaming, what it is, its assessment types, and we'll start finally kind of understanding the mental model of a red team operator. My name is Evanas Multanis, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and feel free to join our Discord server, to which link you can find in the description below to keep up to date with our content. And again, some very exciting stuff we've got coming up at HackerForce. So to understand why a red team operator might need to follow a structured methodology or framework, it's important to understand that every single red team assessment that you will perform will be guided by the goals and objectives established by the client organization. Now, for us as red teamers, this goals and objectives set by the client is referred to as the scope of the assessment. Now, typically in a standard red team assessment, both the red team and the organization will work closely together to develop the scope. And therefore, for a red team assessment to be effective, it must adhere to a structured methodology that aligns with the defined scope. Now, one thing I want to note here is that adherence to the scope is absolutely crucial. And although the scope is not strictly legally binding as of yet, breaching the scope or kind of going out bounds of it, whether that's scanning another system or maybe that's extracting data from a system, can have some significant legal repercussions. Now, of course, there are ways to protect against it, but keep this in mind as it's absolutely crucial. But later in the course, we'll go about, documenting every step of our way throughout an assessment. And, we'll discuss how to avoid common pitfalls when it comes to sticking with the scope. Now, there are many methodologies and frameworks that exist. And if we try to include all of them in this video, it would be quite a long one. But dominantly, you've got the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, and you've got the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So if you've never heard of the term cyber kill chain, essentially it refers to the sequential stages of a cyber attack, and they are the steps taken by an adversary to compromise one or more set of systems. Now, the cyber kill chain is not really a standardized model. As I said before in the previous slide, there are a few so-said kill chains that do exist. In particular, Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain divides its adversary operations into 7 distinct tactics, but other kill chains can be totally different. But essentially, by having this kind of blueprint or this concept, both red teams and blue teams can better, model and simulate attack stages, where red teams will typically use it to map and plan operations, but blue teams will typically use it for analyzing and documenting the progressions of a compromise. So as I just said, Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain divides adversary operations into 7 distinct tactics. Firstly, we have reconnaissance, and during this stage, the adversary will gather intelligence over the target organization, and this can encompass information such as email addresses, domains, potential security vulnerabilities. And then, once enough intelligence has been gathered, the weaponization stage involves utilizing that intelligence to craft payloads designed to exploit a found vulnerability. Now, with the information gathered and the payload ready, comes the delivery stage, where the payload is actually delivered to the target. And then comes the exploitation stage, which triggers the payload to exploit the vulnerability. Now, once these 4 stages are complete, you've got the installation stage, which the adversary will implement some sort of persistence mechanisms to maintain access to the target. And then through the command and control stage, the adversary will establish communication channels with a remote C2 server or command and control server, basically enabling more streamlined and covert access. And finally comes the actions on objective stage, where the adversary will execute their defined objectives in order to achieve their goals. And really that sums it up for the cyber kill chain. It is nothing more than a methodology for us as red teamers to follow. And when approaching an organization, be it small or large, by having a set of distinctive steps from start to finish, such as reconnaissance to the actions on objectives, we can better plan our operations ahead and provide the results that the organization is looking for. So where the cyber kill chain is more of the sequential steps of a cyber attack, the MITRE ATT&CK framework is more used to describe those steps. And it does so by using a knowledge base, a publicly accessible knowledge base that catalogs various adversarial TTPs based on real-world threat observations. Now, there are many applications that utilize the attack framework. You've got threat intelligence, threat hunting, incident response, but really for us as red team operators, it kind of serves as a model for mapping, planning, and executing operations, but also understanding how those TTPs that the attack framework documents actually work. We will take a look at its practical application shortly, but first it's important to understand what matrices, tactics and techniques are. So the matrices are each tailored to a specific domain that defines the known adversarial TTPs we discussed earlier. At the time of this recording, there are three main matrices. You've got the enterprise matrix, which details the TTPs utilized in attacks targeting enterprise environments. You've got the mobile matrix, which is more of attacks targeting mobile devices. And you also got the industrial control systems matrix, which details the TTPs used in operational technology systems. Additionally, the enterprise and mobile matrices are further subdivided into specialized sub-matrices, which essentially offer a hierarchy of particular technologies. So to put this into a more practical perspective, here we have the MITRE ATT&CK framework's website. And you can give it a little browse. You can see a list of rows, a list of columns. These rows are known as tactics. The columns here are techniques. We'll get into these shortly. But the main thing I kind of want to show you here is the matrices drop-down menu. Here you can see an outline of all the matrices that the attack framework defines. And if we click here on enterprise, we'll be able to filter down to the enterprise sector, where you can see a list of tactics and techniques applicable in enterprise networks. Additionally, you've got the sub-matrices here, so we can specifically tailor down to Windows systems, and again, tactics, techniques for Windows specific based environments, maybe that's Active Directory or Azure. So every attack matrix contains a defined set of tactics and techniques which are specific to its domain. And the tactics will represent the strategic objectives of an adversary, with each tactic corresponding to a specific stage in the attack. Essentially, a tactic defines the why, and the technique will represent the specific method or the how used by an adversary to accomplish their objective. So here we have a table that kind of outlines the typical tactic structure. Each stage or each tactic will have its respective identifier. A tactic will begin with a TA and it will have a number following it. So there you can see reconnaissance is TA0043, and this tactic in particular defines the techniques used to gather intelligence about the target organization. And if you look down there below, you've got the tactic ID for resource development, initial access, and the list goes on. As for the technique, they are very similar, but a technique will typically start with a T followed by a number, but also a technique can have a sub-technique, which is basically a more granular description or granular implementation of a technique, to which it will have a number appended to its ID. So you may be wondering, where can you use these tactics and techniques, and why are they really here? So for one, it should be clear by now that they're really used as a public knowledge base. the MITRE ATT&CK framework is at least, but the tactics and techniques in particular serve as a common language between the red team and the client organization. So say for instance, the red team is performing a presentation at the end of the assessment to a list of stakeholders. The red team can speak in the language that the MITRE ATT&CK framework provides through their identifiers to better explain the tactics that were used, the techniques, but then also the organization can take those identifiers and do some research on their own. So to understand all of this a little better, you can navigate back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework's website. And if we scroll down here a little, we'll see a table, and this table is the matrix for enterprise. Now, if you want a different table, you can go to the matrices drop-down menu here and select a different one. But for our example, the enterprise matrix is absolutely fine. So looking more closely at the table, you've got a set of columns and you've got a set of rows. The top row here will define the specific matrices tactic, and every single row that follows it will define its specific technique. Now remember, we said a tactic will begin with a TA followed by a numerical value, and the same really is for the technique, but instead of beginning with a TA, it will begin with a T. Now scrolling down here a little, we've got the phishing technique, and remember we said some techniques have got sub-techniques. And if we click on this little grey box here, we'll be able to see all of the sub-techniques that fall under the phishing techniques category. Now, the attack framework wouldn't really be as useful if it didn't document information. So clicking on one of these techniques here will present a list of I say a list, it will present a comprehensive amount of information about the technique. Here you've got the list of sub-techniques for that technique, the specific technique attributes. So here you've got ID, the platforms it applies to, when it was last modified, more information about this specific technique. And scrolling down here, you'll see the procedure examples, and here you'll be able to see where this specific technique was used in the wild. Now this table will outline a APT group's ID, and it will outline its name, followed by a description that basically describes how this technique was used by that specific adversary. So if we take the INC ransomware group, they have used phishing campaigns that have used spear phishing emails for initial access, and every single description here will include a reference link. Now clicking on this reference link will direct us to an article. Here we have Sentinel-1 in particular, and essentially Sentinel-1 is reporting what is INC ransomware, who does it target, how does it work, so what tools does it use. Tools associated with INC ransomware operations include NetScan, Mega Async Setup, and then a list of arguments that it also uses, showing you here some more information, some code, the code that the ransomware implemented. And by using this information provided as red team operators, we can actually implement the techniques used by those adversaries in our own assessments. So you can really get some good knowledge from these articles. Now coming back to the attack framework, scrolling down a little further, you'll be able to see a list of mitigations that are provided. So these are the mitigations that you would recommend to the client if they fall victim to the specific technique. So here you can implement antivirus, anti-malware software, implement user training, and also scrolling down even further, you'll have a section for detection. So you can recommend to the client, you can implement application log content to detect against phishing techniques. And scrolling down even further, you have a list of references where you can learn more about the specific technique and maybe some implementation methods in your own assessments. So one important question which you might be left with at the end of this video is, how does the cyber kill chain differ from the MITRE ATT&CK framework? So the cyber kill chain is more of a methodology to which an assessment is approached. So essentially it defines the stages of an attack And the MITRE ATT&CK framework provides more of the technical details around those stages that are necessary for tactical execution. So typically the cyber kill chain and the MITRE ATT&CK framework will be used in conjunction, and when doing so, it really creates a robust toolkit for conducting thorough red team operations. So hopefully this theoretical and a little bit of a practical demonstration kind of clears up the concept behind the cyber kill chain and the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And in the next video, we'll take a look at actually planning a red team assessment, actually going ahead and scoping out an assessment, writing the rules of engagement, and from then we'll get into the actual practical bits. So we'll go about setting a C2 infrastructure, performing reconnaissance, and all that good stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like, and we'll see you in the next one.